Welcome to day 20 of our Inktober Zentangle challenge.
Good morning.
And today we are so glad that you've joined with us for this session again as we learn our 20th Tangle pattern and insert it into our composition layout. So let's get started with that. The Tangle pattern for today is by one of my favorite Zentangle creators. His name is Tomás Padrós, and he creates really amazing Tangle patterns, and they are almost always very structured and very intricate in their details, both in their appearance and sometimes in how they're assembled. Now, he does a fantastic job of creating step outs that we can follow and that allow us to break them down easily, but because of their complexity, both geometrically and just in the structure and the detailed angles and so on, it can sometimes be challenging to make them look as good as Tomas does. And so we want to try to break down one of these forms today. His Tangle pattern is called Kangular, and I'm going to show you, as I've been doing on my little post-it, a couple ideas that might be helpful. Now, Kangular can be drawn in a variety of ways, and he also has a version called Blooming Kangular, which I've actually used in another video of mine. But I want to use this same silly little tool as hopefully what will be a helpful guide for you as you draw the shape Kangular. Now, because it can be drawn in square patterns and zigzagging moving patterns or in straight line patterns, we have to kind of pick one and take a look at how it's made. In my composition, I'm going to be using one that is more like a ribbon, a straight shot. So I want to show you how we're going to assemble this. With my little tool that I made, and if you didn't see that other video, it was my Middleton video, I think 2 days back in the Zentangle series here. But I folded a post-it in half, and then I just measured from the corner, 1 inch here. Oops, I'm off there. From the corner, it's ½ an inch, and then 1 inch. And then ½ an inch and 1 inch. And it just enables me to make quick angular lines without having to flop around with a ruler. So let me just show you how this might work. So we take this pattern that Tomas has developed, and we're going to create some angled L shapes that show up on our page. And that's going to form, or V's if you want to think of it that way, but I like to think of it as an angled L. These are perpendicular, they're at a right angle to each other, and it's very simple. Now you see that I drew the corner here on the right side. So that means the next line that I'm going to draw, I'm going to want to place the corner to the left side. So I allow a little space. Now this part you just have to kind of eyeball based on how far apart you want these shapes to be. And we're going to just draw another angled shape, just like we started with, but we're creating an aura along those two edges as long as we're flipping the corners to opposite sides. So do you see what's happened there? So now we have a corner on the top, so I need to place the corner on the bottom. So I line these up again, give myself a little space. I create my aura line, aura of this line, and just creating this same angled shape again. And so now we have a corner here, we need to put a corner there. So we just create this down across. I'll just do 1 or 2 more and just show you how this develops into a little ribbon or a pattern. But as you can see, I'm going across at an, whoops, shoved the whole thing off there. I'm going across at an angle across my page here. So you have to plan that concept as well. But here I'm going to put that corner down toward the bottom again and just draw my angle. And as you can see, I'm doing these at a ½ inch in size, roughly. And that's going to create a good enough size. Now, once we have that basic flow of our pattern there, and I could have done a better job with my spacing in between, but just showing you this process. Now we need to draw some other little spots on this. Now, because we're creating a pattern that has little corners peeking out of it, we need to think about that. So let me grab a pencil. So we're going to end up creating lines that basically close up these shapes into what will appear to be larger triangles. And the reason I use this little tool, by the way, is because just drawing these lines would be very easy. But keeping them in the same dimensions and proportions is actually far more difficult than it might first appear. So this is just a way to kind of cheat the system, so to speak, and help yourself draw a more consistent shape. But once we envision where that line would be, we can now use that in our mind to know how we're going to draw our next part, which is just a box It's an exact same shape, but we're going to draw this one freehand and smaller so that it comes in a little ways on these lines and just extends out past this imaginary line that we see and goes to about the same place in the opposite direction. Now once we have that shape, we can now use that line as we come across here and do the same thing. Now you can see it's making a smaller line. That's okay. Now we go across here and we're going to make that same larger line. It's a larger box. We follow that line across, and now we do the same thing here. And so we're creating our initial shapes which are going to act as a guide. Now we can go back and draw our smaller square here, being mindful of how we want to keep the evenness of this little piece that's going through. See, now I follow across. When I say evenness, I mean the width of this little piece. We're kind of thinking about that as we draw this so that we can keep some sense of a pattern similarity here. Now here I kind of messed up. This is really wide. But you can get this idea of what we do. Now once we have those in place, now we can actually close up these lines on both sides of our little shape here. And we have the basic pattern now. Now this would get inked. I'm going to do this very quickly and sloppily to show you. So these areas that I'm marking, we would ink in solid. And this would leave us with the appearance that these little shapes are wandering in and out of these holes that we've created, these triangular shaped holes, and it's given us a ribbon. Now we can also do what I'm going to today. We can create auras that duck underneath those extending points to really emphasize the fact that this is sort of a ribbon-based pattern in this example. And we have that going across. You could add additional auras. I'm going to add a line that goes down the center of this inner shape. And then we're going to shade this in a way that really accentuates that over and under appearance. But that is the essence of how we're going to assemble this shape, or at least how I'm going to show you. Now, for me, on my layout, I'm going to draw this angular ribbon in this general area. And I'm going to draw my first little L or bracket shape there. And that's where I'm going to place this. Oops, I already made a little faux pas there with my pen squiggling on me. We can fix that though, just make it thicker line. So I get that, and now remember, we flip our corner going the opposite direction. I'm going to try to leave a little space in between there. And I just create that. Now again, I flip my corner around, and I have to aura one of these lines. So I wouldn't want to draw it over this way, right, like this, because that would not aura one of these lines. So now I'm going to come here, try to get that approximate same spacing between them. Creating that. And I'm going to continue this process being mindful of where I place that corner in my little template tool here. So now that I've got my row in place, now I can start adding those other shapes. And we're going to start, or I'm going to start with that. Remember, I'm imagining those lines that I'm going to draw, so I want to be mindful of where that point is going to be. And it's kind of right straight out from here is where it should be, right? So if you wanted to, you could even take your pencil. You could draw yourself a guide to how far out you want that to be. You could do that to help target in each case. It's a very simple little extra step, but you could do that to help be a guide visually for you. Now that one's going to be off the page. So once you have that, it becomes a very simple matter to just draw a line perpendicular and that connects your other lines. And now you can follow this down, or you can draw your other line, but I like to follow this so I know I'm going to get that in the right spot. And now this is going to come right into here. And that might be the way to do it, actually, now that I see this. If we created a pattern here, we know exactly where to draw that by drawing this line first. if we've targeted our little dot there as I showed you. Okay. It just kind of creates the spacing that we need for that inner line. So now here, see, I know exactly where to go. On this one, it's a little different, but we're going to do it here, right here. And then I'm just watching the width of this, and I can carry this one over right there to that point. Look at that. Just like that as we go. So this one's going to come right across, and then this one right across, just like that. So this one, this one. Now we don't have one over there, so we'll kind of use this to help guide us this way, because it's going to be off the page a little bit. Just like that. So now I've got all those base pieces. So now I can start connecting some lines. Just straight to those corners. I hope I didn't overcomplicate this or make it more difficult. There are easier ways to draw it if you do it freehand. I won't deny that. But the trouble that, at least that I have, when I draw this particular pattern in a freehand way, is that I end up that all of my little triangles or my little perpendicular lines are not consistent or parallel, and the shape doesn't come out right. It kind of looks funky. Like Tomas in his step out will show people drawing, or show himself drawing, these little triangles along a grid, and that's fine. I can draw triangles all day, but I can't draw them exactly at the same angle over and over again. It just, my hand just does not work that way. So this just allows me to be more precise. Now here we're going to start inking in these areas here. So on all of the different triangles and squares that we've created, like where I've just made those marks, we need to ink all of that in. So I'm going to do that. We'll probably speed up the film. No point watching me lay ink down for 40 minutes or whatever it takes me. So I'll just zip through this, and we'll catch you on the far end of it once we're all done. As I'm finishing up the inking here on this ribbon pattern of Kangular, I wanted to mention that another way that you can draw these kinds of patterns, especially this particular one, is by creating a grid, let's say a pencil grid, on your paper or your tile, wherever it is that you're drawing this pattern. And by having that grid of little squares, you can much more easily create the various shapes in a consistent and uniform way. And that really is a lot of the videos that I saw online in the past, not during Inktober here, but in the past, where people are using this pattern, that's how many of them are creating it. They're choosing to lay out a grid in pencil on their paper first, and then they can very easily direct, and you can even just draw these elements first and then create little triangles around it. It's actually very simple to do, but it just requires you to lay that grid out first. I just wanted to do it with that silly little tool because it let me just go directly to the placement that I wanted for this ribbon. Well, now that that has been inked, I want to do the next step of this pattern, at least as I'm envisioning it here, and I want to create a very tight aura that follows along this straight line, and when we come to the little mountain peaks here, those little points that are sticking out, I'm going to go behind it. So I'm going to do it like this. Not only does this sort of unify these shapes, but it gives a greater impression, especially once we shade it, of the over and under, because this now seems to be breaking out of this restricted area, or not restricted, but of this limited area there. So it just helps with that illusion a little more. Now, if you have room, if your points stick out far enough and you want to do a second aura to even further accentuate that, and then if we have other tangles bumping up against it, you might find it easier to separate visually then you can do that. This will require a little bit of care here as you make those lines, and you got to make sure that these tips stick out far enough for you to get behind it, or else you might lose that effect. So mine are kind of right on the verge of being too small, but I'm going to try it anyway. And now the last part of the drawing that I'm going to do is not on these, not the spaces between, but the one that goes underneath. See how it goes, this piece goes underneath here and so on. The one that's underneath, I'm going to draw a central line that auras the two outer ones and just creates a little bit more visual distinction for this particular pattern. And mine's a little wobbly there as I go, and that's all right, it just gives it a little character. So I'm just grabbing my pencil here, and I'll show you how I'm going to shade mine. Wherever these pieces go over or under each other, in this case the under, I'm going to add a little graphite along that line, and then when I blend it, it will further enhance that sense of over and under, dimensionality. And then the other place that I'm going to add a tiny bit is along these points as it overlaps that little border that I created behind it. And now we'll grab our tortillons and just do a little bit of blending. And let's take a look at the overall placement here after day 20's Tangle has been inserted. And Gail, how did yours come out?
I didn't have as much room.
You nailed it. It's just a shorter version of it. You have a smaller space in your, the way your other patterns have come together, but certainly absolutely nothing wrong with that. And now we can see the side by side here. If I can move my sheets a little bit, there we go. And so very, very similar. Slight differences in length, but it looks like you used a similar shape in terms of the dimension of it.
Right.
It's just that it wasn't as long. Perfect. Everything looks great. Well, folks, that's it for today's session, but we have our new Tangle pattern added, and our composition continues to flesh out. Well, with today being day 20, that means only 11 more days to go. So I look forward to seeing everyone real soon, tomorrow, as a matter of fact, for part 21 of our Inktober Zentangle challenge. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.